Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Before we get started, I want to give a special shout out to one of my loyal sponsors. This beautiful custom banner behind me was brought to you by Edward Delgado. You can find him on Facebook, El Chapo of Flags. Great quality at a great price. Again, go check him out today, El Chapo of Flags on Facebook. Now it's time for another Mock Draft Monday here on the channel. Every Monday since the Super Bowl and through Draft Week, we'll be talking with amazing guests and breaking down New York Jets mock-related draft scenarios. On today's show, we're being joined by an incredibly special guest. Every Monday, and like I said, every Monday since the Super Bowl, we've had a special guest on the show. In this series, we've had analysts, we've had former players, and now we welcome a demigod to the show. That is NBC Sports Edge lead college football and NFL draft analyst. Let's give a warm welcome to Thor Nystrom. Thor, welcome, my man.
Hey, thanks, man. I thought I had a good name, but the El Chapo of Flags is definitely above me. It's in the name hierarchy for sure.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sure he appreciates that shout out, and yes, quality stuff. He's one of the best Jet fans I know, and also he does great work. So again, appreciate having him as a loyal sponsor of this show. So let's go right off the top here, Thor. And it seems like at this point a foregone conclusion that the Jets and Zach Wilson are going to be happening based on everything that we're hearing. And if this is true, why should Jet fans get excited about him being the number 2 pick?
Well, okay, so I don't mean to throw hot water on it. I mean, he's a great prospect, and what you would be, I mean, like the thing to get behind in the hype is the arm, right? Like, and he can make all the throws. You see all that, you see this highlight reel, whatever. He throws lasers into all 3 sectors. So that's, that would be the thing that you build around and you get excited about is, we got a guy that, not only has the gun, but will, has the inclination to use it in all circumstances. There's a bit of riverboat gambler in Zach Wilson for sure. The reason that maybe I might be looking other directions if I was the Jets, to be honest. And there are reasons for that we can get into if you want to. But certainly Zach Wilson has a very high ceiling because of that arm. So I mean, if you are going to take a quarterback, I would understand taking him, but I might look at a couple of the other prospects. So I'm doing it,
All right,
making the pick
normally
myself.
we're going to just mix it up here, okay?
Sure.
I've got some line of questioning to go through, but you know what? Sometimes you got to be willing to call an audible at the line of scrimmage. So let's jump right into it. Normally we end each of these interviews by doing a mock draft. So let's just start right there at number 2. You said, you may go in a different direction. Well, guess what? You're the now general manager of the New York Jets. You have the 2nd overall pick. What are you doing with it? Tell us who you would go with and why.
So it would, well, so the opinion of Sam Darnold that you have, there, if I was in that position, I would have a better boots on the ground idea of him. So like, obviously, as you know, the first thing that comes with this decision, it's a decision that sort of flowers out of a different decision, in deciding about Darnold. If I was comfortable with Darnold, at least like if I get some good weapons around him, this kid's going to, level up. I would take Kyle Pitts. To me, Kyle Pitts is the number 2 prospect overall in this draft. And that's baked in with quarterback value put in there. He's a unicorn kid that we haven't really seen. It's like you're getting a Megatron light as a wide receiver, and then a guy that also is, can play in line. Of course, he can play outside, he can play in the slot. You can move him around. He can be a lead blocker if you want. He can do everything. So like, that would be there. And if not, like of course, the other thing, the other factor with it is what offers are you getting for Sam Darnold? Because we don't know that either, right? Like if you looked around, if I had the ability to call the other 31 teams, if my best offer is a 5th round pick, I'm probably not going to do that. And that might be a tiebreaker in my decision-making process. But of course, if there's a 2nd round pick out there, high 2nd round, that's probably something that's going to move the needle for me. And then of course it would make it much easier to take a guy like Justin Fields, and Trey Lance for me is right there too. I have Wilson as QB4 behind those 2 guys. But I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. And of course, even sort of talking about these different things and not just having a clearly delineated answer 4 weeks out, it's indicative of a scenario where you have to listen to the phones, both for Darnold, but also to the also for the number 2 pick, of course. We just saw Miami got, a king's ransom. They got 3 first-round picks and a third to move to 12. And then, of course, they ponied some of that back up to move back up to 6. But long story short, if I'm comfortable with Darnold, I'm taking Pitts. If I'm not, I'm taking Justin Fields.
And quickly, a quick follow-up on Pitts. You are not the only one that is a Pitts fan. We heard, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah said on the conference call with the media a couple weeks back, if you could pick one player from this class, basically, that could be a Hall of Fame kind of player, he said most of us would, kind of unanimously agree that it would be Kyle Pitts. So is he
sure.
Travis Kelce 2.0? Is he Tony Gonzalez? Do you go back further? What can you called him a unicorn, and I've heard that term with him before. Who is his pro player comparison? What can he be in the NFL?
When it's a unicorn when it's super duper hard to find a comp, even for an elite player, right? Because usually it's like I do 500 player comps when I put out my 500 player big board the week before the draft, and so I have to comp. I mean, I even comp punters. I'll give a comp for the 5th punter. Those are harder. Usually with the top prospects, it's fairly easy. And this, like from watching the top guys. You watch Fields, or you watch Lawrence, or you watch ETN. Things are revoked in your head. Right. Like ETN for me, what he reminded me of was Reggie Bush. I hadn't seen a player like that, in that very specific sort of box, do those sort of things with the explosion since Reggie Bush. That's what you're sort of talking about with that, and just to use one example. But with Kyle Pitts, he sort of defies the comp process because, again, he's just as a receiver, he might be the number 1 receiver in this class because, if he was just a receiver, you would call him Megatron light. He has the exact same body as Megatron. Like his dimensions they're so close to Megatron's. He's, it's like height, weight, just about the same. And I believe he has a longer wingspan because I believe Kyle Pitts just tested with, or measured him with the longest wingspan in either the history of the testing or else just recently. I don't remember what the timeline was, but he beat DK Metcalf for that. So he's obviously a long kid too. And then the athletic profile is just sort of a step below that because obviously Megatron was a unicorn unto himself. But just as a receiver, you have that, and the ball skills, everything like that with Pitts, wins in the intermediate area. Consistently wins downfield. I mean, like talk about a guy, you turn 50-50 balls into 90-10 balls, it's that sort of thing, just like Megatron did. So you have that. And then it's like, again, the ability to play in line. He's improved as a blocker, not there yet. But before he was an abomination of a blocker. Like before it was like, the kid from Mississippi, Evan Ingram, right? Yeah. Like 4 years ago in the draft, whatever. Like when you watch that kid at Ole Miss, it's like, okay, this kid is not a tight end because he does not like contact at all. He's a big slot. I mean, that's what he is. That's what Pitts was earlier in his career. And last year, he very clearly made a concerted effort to work on 2 things, I think. Number 1 was concentration drops because he has awesome ball skills. But a couple times he would, the concentration thing, let a ball eat him up or, be looking up field before he turned, whatever. He had a couple of those. And he completely cleaned that up last season. He had 0 drops, despite the ludicrous statistical profile he put up. Absolutely ludicrous. It was that, and then the blocking was the really cool thing because he went from, again, a really poor blocker to someone that could absolutely hang in line, and then in space as well. He's going to be better at because. In terms of length and athleticism, he's not going to go against a defender that has more length or athleticism than he does. And he clearly has the want. This is a kid who's like gotten better and better and better. And then he got to the point where he was a stud, but there was these specific sort of weaknesses still. And he honed in on them. Last off season, like I said, the blocking thing was clear. And then the concentration drops, you did not see them again. There was not one of them in 2020. I mean, that is pretty amazing. So, it's all those different things as far as he goes.
Again, a super talented guy, and man, the Jets would be lucky to get a player like him. It seems like a luxury with all the needs they have. And speaking of needs, again, they have an overflowing amount of needs. And let's go to one of the spots that have a huge need. That's interior offensive line in this class. And I saw from you that you had my guy there, and I love this guy. And he is numero uno on your interior offensive line rankings. That's Alijah Vera-Tucker out of USC. What stands out about him? And I hate to ask this next part of the question because I'm afraid of what you're going to say, but floor versus ceiling on his NFL draft stock, how low could you see him falling in the draft? How high could he go?
Sure. Well, he's we knew he was a really good player coming into this season, and we also knew that he was a good athlete. What was really cool in 2020 was initially Vera-Tucker did not plan to play because his conference didn't plan to play, and then Vera-Tucker, I think in his head, just like some of these other kids like Bateman, and some of these other examples where when the conference came out and did that, they just sort of then officially opted out. And even when the conference initially, came back, there was still a discussion of whether or not they were going to play. And Vera-Tucker didn't necessarily have to, because he was one of those guys that was already going to be right near the top of the interior class. It's just maybe a delineation of the top three or whatever. But they talked him back into playing. Clay Helton has talked about this, where he went to Vera-Tucker and said, like, not only is it going to improve your stock just sort of in a vacuum by playing, putting one more season on tape, you get the second elite season. But we would love for you to take over for Austin Jackson at left tackle. And, they run an air raid, the Graham Harrell, the Leach disciple, USC has gone to the air raid. And so playing left tackle in a system like that, just like the kid from Wazoo a year or two ago that was super athletic, like those kind of kids, they've seen so many different pass pro reps, like on the outside at left tackle. Sometimes they don't have the run blocking experience, but Alijah Vera-Tucker already had that from the inside and stuff like that, playing that going back years. And so he got to go back out to left tackles the first time he played it since high school. And he did really, really well. Like his first 5 games, like during USC's regular season, which I believe was 5 games, because the Pac-12 they had the condensed one. He was awesome. Like, you look at his sacks, his pressures allowed, his run blocking, everything was aces. And so at that point, like heading into the Pac-12 title, it was like he was sort of encroaching upon Rashawn Slater's ground of that, like, Rashawn Slater played left tackle at Northwestern throughout, but of that thing of like, this is a guy who hasn't, we know he's going to be a stud on the interior, but like with Slater, there's also the thing of like, he very probably could play tackle in the NFL because, he succeeded for so long. He has the athletic profile to overcome a lack of length on the outside. And then, in Slater's case, he had also shut down this procession of NFL edge rushers in college. Chase Young being the most famous example of that. And you can sort of go down the line. Like there was like 4 or 5 of them. He did a really good job against Epinesa from Iowa as well. Kenny Willekes, that kid from Michigan State, he did a good job against him too. And in Vera-Tucker's case, the profile was heading that way, and he had a really good opportunity in the Pac-12 title game to just sort of like, try to make an argument that he was right on Rashawn Slater's edge, or right on his, plane or whatever, because he got to face Oregon in Kayvon Thibodeau, who was a number 1 recruit a couple years before that, and may end up being analogous to Chase Young. We'll see in the next class, but Thibodeau is going to go very, very high. He was like, I think he was the number 1 recruit in his class. If he wasn't, he was number 2, but he's just a freak of an edge guy. And the issue was he ate up Alijah Vera-Tucker in that game, just absolutely abused him. Like there was 2 sacks, I think 7 pressures, like the stats that what Tucker gave up in that, Vera-Tucker gave up in that game was almost equivalent to what he had done in his career the past, year plus leading up to that, the full season and then the 5 games. And why that can, yes, it's a small sample, of course, but Vera-Tucker, there was no other studs that he faced at left tackle in 2020. And so like, just that example is like what you're concerned about with those guys on the outside is Vera-Tucker's proven he's a good athlete. So we're not concerned about that. What we're concerned about is the lack of the length, because it's like, when you watch UFC, they'll put like, height, weight, but they always put reach, which is super important. And you always hear like the announcer saying like, it's going to be very hard for this guy to get, in this guy's reach, whatever. It's the same thing in the NFL. And that's why it matters. It's not just like a sort of nebulous talking point that doesn't have merit. It's like it's the exact same thing, because you're talking about, you can engage with the other guy first. And guys that don't have length, they allow edges to get into their pads. If they don't have, other trump cards sort of to shut that down. And Vera-Tucker in that game show he did. So long story short, for me, Vera-Tucker is not a fit on the outside because of that, or at least I would not draft him with that idea in mind. Again, maybe it was a small sample thing, and I still like Vera-Tucker, but for me, I would be drafting him as a guard, where again, I have him as the number 1, not only guard in the class, but center as well, combining the interior class. And I just think in there, he's proven everything. He's proven that he's a really good run blocker, and his issues the very specific issues that he had in pass protection, they were not due to technical foibles or stuff like that. It was specifically due to these limitations that were specific to the edge. And he's not going to face those guys in the interior. And even if he did have an issue with a guy, he because of a physical discrepancy, he could get help. But on the interior, he's not going to face the same sort of thing, and he has enough power for it and everything like that. So for me, this is a guy that like. You draft him first. For me, he's a first-round player. He's going to be an immediate starter at guard. He's going to be a long-time starter at guard. But for me, the difference there, and it's a very fine line. But for me, the way that I see Vera-Tucker is a guy that maybe you can play him at right tackle in a pinch kind of a thing. But I would not draft him like that. Whereas with Rashawn Slater, I would be fine as a tackle needy team taking him as a tackle, despite the fact that they have very similar frames and reaches and stuff like that.
Again, we're speaking with NBC Sports Edge lead college football and NFL draft analyst Thor Nystrom here on the show. So let me ask you this bluntly. Is there any chance Alijah Vera-Tucker could be on the board for the Jets at 23rd overall?
I do. Yeah. That would like if in Vegas, if you're setting the over under, it's probably going to go a little bit higher than that. So I assume like if you were to get odds on that, you would be the slight underdog. But like, I think, like a plus 150 kind of a thing. Like, I don't think it's crazy prohibitive odds. And it's for a couple of different reasons. Number one, just because of the way that the board is right now, it seems at this point, a 100% guarantee that 5 quarterbacks are going to be going above that pick. The Jets may be taking one of them, but that's going to happen. And then like, you talk about the other offensive linemen and stuff like that, the receivers, the Pitts, and stuff like that. When you start to stack the board, like the guys that we look at as sort of consensus top 20 guys, there's more than 20 of them, right? Like, when usually we're talking like, oh, that's a top 20 prospect, but there's more than that. So like a couple of those guys are going to fall. And Vera-Tucker, because of that, it's not even a wonky profile because again, he's showing it at guard for sure. It's unimpeachable there. But it's just like, teams might look at, we would prefer, for instance, like Tevin Jenkins or Darrisaw or stuff like that. And if for sure 4 tackles go above him, that starts to become in play. But even 3, and then, you get more defenders above you, at that point, it also becomes how many linebackers have gone, because you think about a scenario where like Parsons is LB1, but he hasn't gone by that point, that would affect that obviously because other positions are filtering up. But if Parsons goes, and then, the kid from Notre Dame with the name I can't pronounce, and then Xavier Collins, they're all around there too. If guys like that, if the linebacker position, for instance, got hit 3 times before that pick, there's a really good chance that he could. So there's different iterations. I would put it at slight underdog, but it is not out of the question or, the realm of possibility at all.
I did not know math was going to be involved in this interview, but I like the math.
It's the only math I can do is like bookie
math.
You
go. That's fantastic. So with that being said, there are a lot of draft nicks, and they say this every year, that you can find interior offensive linemen later in the draft. You can find plug-and-play guard and center starters, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, going all the way down. The Jets, if that's true, the Jets have been quite unsuccessful in that over the years.
So the Vikings, where I'm coming to you from.
There you go. So let me ask you, is there some names that Jets fans should be familiar with? They got a lot of picks in this draft. They got 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, a pair of third-round picks, and even more on top of that. Is there a chance that there are some interior offensive linemen, either at guard or center, that they could draft in those kind of rounds that could be plug-and-play guys? And if so, who are some of those names?
Yeah, if you're not going to go Vera-Tucker there in the first round, or you don't have the opportunity, for instance, to get a guy like Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson early in the second, I think what you're proposing is the correct course of action. Because this isn't the best interior class. And then like there's the couple guys at the top, but I think there's sort of a quagmire once you get beyond, into like tier 4 and 5. And so because of that, I think there's guys that are going to filter down. And so like I think you can get a good value proposition, whereas like we don't have like a grouping of studs at the top of this interior class, and it's not sort of fleshed out there in the prime sort of tiers. But again, like there's things for every flavor, I think, beyond that, once you go into sort of the middle tiers, and one of these guys is going to drop. There's a couple tackle converts to keep your eyes on that could fall down the cracks because of the unclear position delineation, I suppose. Jackson Carman is one of those guys for me. Jackson Carman was not listed on either Mel Kiper or Todd McShay's last boards. Mel Kiper lists like 145 and Todd McShay lists like 230. I vehemently disagree with that. I had Jackson Carman, I think, as my number 8 interior offensive lineman. He was the blindside protector for Trevor Lawrence at Clemson that last season. But like for me, he's a better fit on the interior, and he even lost weight going into his pro day. I think because he wanted to show people that maybe he could have quicker feet. Because on tape he got embarrassed a couple of times by speed and movement on the outside. That's fair enough. For me, the safer move is inside because he's a fabulous run blocker. You can see it on tape, for sure, but you can also see it even like this is rarer to see it in the advanced statistical splits. Like when you look at Travis Etienne splits, you'll notice that when he goes to the right, he averages about 2 yards. Last season, he averaged about 2 yards less per carry to the right side than he did the left side, and that was because the left side, led by Jackson Carman, was consistently resetting the line of scrimmage 2 yards backwards. So it's basically free yards. So he's one guy that I like. Deontay Brown from Alabama is interesting. He's sort of a scheme specific kind of a guy because he's an enormous dude who's like beastly in the run game, but he's going to have some issues in pass protection. He's not a guy that you want out, second, going out trying to pick off linebackers. He's not going to be able to do it. But like in a phone booth, he's sort of like the Mountain from Game of Thrones. Like he's the guy that you pick as your tribute or whatever to send out there. So he's interesting. Same way in Ben Cleveland. A guard from Georgia. He's a super duper well-built kid and like run blocking is awesome. Like he's a nasty kid. And he also tested very well for his size. And he's also a fluid athlete because Ben Cleveland used to be a baseball star. He may have been, for sure, I think he would have been drafted and gone through the minor leagues if he didn't have football as a backup option. What's hilarious about that is he measured in at 6'6", 354 at his pro day. So he could have been like Cecil Fielder, a bigger Cecil Fielder, I suppose. Yeah. But anyway, he's another one. Josh Myers, Kendrick Green are both guys that have both center and guard versatility from the Big Ten that are down there. Jack Anderson was one of the top recruits in Texas Tech history as a guard, started from day one, did really well, all Big Ten accommodation, all freshman team right away, started for 4 years. He's another guy that's going to fall down there. Sedarius Hutchinson is one other name that I'll mention from South Carolina. He didn't play offensive line in high school. He was just a huge kid that was a really good athlete, a good enough athlete to be a legitimate player on the basketball courts in high school. And when he went to college, they told him that he could stay at either tight end or defensive end potentially because of that athleticism, but they wanted to try him at the offensive line because they thought because of his body type and the athleticism that would play up. He's still a work in progress in terms of his form, in terms of his technique. Like they put him on the field initially just because he was this huge kid that moves so fluidly. It's just, that's how he would have to win because he didn't know what he was doing initially, but he's gotten better and better and better. If that progression continues, he is going to be a steal. If it doesn't, if his technique, lingers here, if we've hit a point where it's not going to go forward, he could be out of the league pretty quick. But the thing about kids like that, you take a shot on them because the price tag is going to be right. You could probably get Hutcherson in like the 6th round or so. And if you hit, you have a long time starting guard and potentially even a plus starter because of that athleticism and that body. So he would be another guy that I would look at, if I was going to wait until, 4, 5, 6, those kind of rounds.
And Thor, before we get you out of here, just a couple of quickies here. First off, and I've been asking a few of these people on my radio show about this, so I want to bring it to the Zoom game. Who are some players that Thor Nystrom you're willing to bet your career on? This is the kind of guy that you're going to pound the table for. And when, Jet fans that are listening into this, doesn't have to be a Jets related player or someone that could go to the Jets, just whoever player in this entire class that you're willing to bet your life on, that during the draft, we're going to hear that guy drafted. And the first thing we're going to think of is, oh, that's the Thor Nystrom guy. That's the guy that he talked about on the YouTube series. So who's that player or players?
Probably Javonte Williams from North Carolina. I think he's the best running back in the class. Most people have him at running back 3. I think he's going to be a star. I think he already is a star. I would say him. And then just because this is a Jets thing, I'm going to say Justin Fields. He's been unfairly nitpicked throughout the draft process. To me, he is worthy of the 2nd pick or the 3rd pick or whatever. And he's not being talked about that way. It's a kid that played top flight competition his entire career, excelled against it, and came into college as one of the top dual threat quarterbacks of all time. He has every bit the arm strength that Zach Wilson has, only he runs a 40 in the mid 4.4s. And again, he's proven it against top flight competition, whereas Zach Wilson last season played the SP Plus number 89 schedule, and that was including UCF, which they counted full strength, but in the bowl game they were not, because most of their players opted out, including Richie Grant, who's in this class, and Robinson, their star cornerback, was also in this class. So Zach Wilson didn't play a lot last season, whereas Justin Fields, you saw him consistently dominate top flight competition. That would be one other kid that I would say.
And Thor, before we get you out of here, we'll do it rapid fire style to get you out of here in time. So we're going to do a rapid fire mock draft for the Jets. You just give us your pick. You can give a quick explanation for why you picked it. This is your mock. You're the GM. You say what happens. So let's recap. Second overall, who would you go with?
Second overall, I would go with, well, if it's me, I'm going to go with Pitts.
Okay, Pitts. Perfect. So 23rd overall. You have Pitts now at second overall. What do you do at 23rd overall, the second first-round pick for the Jets?
Would you say offensive line become – what do you think is the biggest need after that?
I feel like they're pigeonholed to either taking interior offensive line or corner, probably whatever the best value is at that point.
Okay, so we'll just assume that, J.C. Horn and Farley and Surtain are gone. But, if those guys are all gone and there's been a couple of those other defenders, like I mentioned before, a guy like Vera-Tucker certainly could be. So let's just say that I'll take him there.
Sure. And then one of the sexiest picks of the draft for me is 34th overall. I think that's tasty. You reset the board. I've talked about this with all our draft guys before. And with everything you said, the math, and I think we talk about that every year, if guys inevitably have to slip, when you start counting everything up, you're like, wait, everyone can't go in that range at 34. Who are some guys? Again, the Jets have needs at wide receiver. Again, still corner. Interior offensive line, as we mentioned. And also edge rusher is another intriguing spot.
Yeah. So for me, I would be hoping, if I was the Jets, I would be hoping that, a standout immediate starter, either cornerback or edge, falls. In the cornerback class, there's that drop after that top three. So it might be hard. You either got to go with a kid like Eric Stokes he's played for a while at Georgia and he showed that he was a stud athlete. If you're looking for a potential outside guy, or you could take Elijah Molden, who's going to be a really, really good slot for a long time, but he's small and the athleticism is not quite as high. And in the edge class, I do think someone's going to fall down there. I don't know if your scouts are going to sign off on it or going to love the kid, because there's different opinions about like the top 5-6 edge guys in this class. But for sure, there's a scenario where Rousseau falls. I don't think that Kwity Paye falls. And I don't think that Ujulari falls either, but I do think that there's a shot that Rousseau gets there, because there's all these questions about his game. Certainly Jalen Phillips could be there. Joseph Osai, I think for sure is going to be there. So there's guys that you could go there. And then I think with the Jets as well, it would be, if I wasn't like 100% sold and excited, like in high-fiving everyone at one of those two positions, I'm taking a running back, because like assuming one of the top three ones is there, for me it'd be the top two, because I know one of them, if any of the three are there, one of those two guys will be, but for me it's Javonte or Najee Harris. So I think for me those would be my two fallbacks. And what I would be, again, sitting dead red on is someone that I really like falling down. Perhaps that's Rousseau. If not, for me, it might be Javonte Williams. The cornerbacks there, it becomes hard, because again, like you have the sure things at the top. And then after that, you either have to take a kid that was really, really good in college and has some NFL bloodlines like Molden, but is smaller. He's confined to the slot. There's some athletic things that are going to cap the ceiling a little bit. Or you have to go a guy like Stokes, where, there's other question marks about him. It happens to be on the outside. But I think for me, like, I'll just say that Rousseau falls there, but if people think that that's unrealistic, I think one of them will fall. But if that is, I think I might take Javonte Williams there, but I love that kid. So.
All right, Thor, I could do this all day long. If we had all day, we could do a 24-hour show about it. But you're a busy man, and I understand. Thank you so much for taking the time. Our Jet fans appreciate it. And thank you, and enjoy the draft, man.
Hey, appreciate you, brother.